Hello, BookTube. All right, I'm back. We're continuing with the Rad Pad. We're continuing with our Q&A, our 7.4K Q&A. We are at Mayberry Book Club. How many people do you predict will win the Booker Prize this year? I'm trying not to think about the Booker Prize this year. What was your favorite bookshop or landmark to visit when you were in Baltimore? What was it, Kelmscott? I went to Kelmscott last time I was in Baltimore, a used bookstore that was terrific, just amazing. Don't know if it's still in business. This was years ago that I went. Just watched your DNF tag video. Could you mention a book you reviewed that especially made you jump up and down in a pool of blood? The most recent one was a collection of short stories that we saw on this channel, Fraternity by Nugent. But there have been others. There have been a few this year. I just recently read Dave Rubin's book, Burn This Book, which made me incandescently furious. I recently read Michael Bolton's book, The Room Where It Happened. That made me incandescently furious. I recently read Sarah Huckabee Sanders' book, incandescently furious. Just, there's been quite a few. I haven't written reviews of a lot of those, but they're coming. Let's see here. John M. says, is there a recent biography that changed your opinion of the individual to positive and one that had the opposite effect? For me, for example, the former are Meacham's Destiny and Power and Roll's George Marshall, and of the latter, Meacham's American Lion and Nassau's The Patriarch. Well, giving me a more positive spin on a person, Gene Edward Smith's book on Ulysses S. Grant certainly did that. That's an example I've mentioned on this channel before. But also, Damien Searles wrote a book on Hermann Rorschach. But it wasn't so much changed my opinion of him as it suddenly gave me an opinion of him. Suddenly I realized I'd only known him as, the Rorschach inkblot test. I hadn't thought at all about the man behind those tests. And Damien Searles' book is incredible for doing that. Just amazing. I don't know if that's not exactly what you're thinking, but that comes to mind. Matthew L. says, number one, do you agree with me that Nathaniel Hawthorne is a better short story writer than novelist? That is called leading the witness. No, I prefer Hawthorne's novels. For me personally, The Twice Told Tales is the peak of his art. Well, it is really good. You're right about that. Number two, also, I'd like to get your opinion on a couple of mammoths. John Cowper Powys' A Glastonbury Romance, which I'm reading right now. He hasn't done it for me. And Glastonbury Romance especially. It just seemed to me to be a lot of stew and not many ingredients. And Romain Rolland's Jean Christophe, oh my, you're taking me back, aren't you? I haven't read it in so long. I should read it again. Someday there will be a new translation, and it'll be from Viking Press or something like that. It'll be at 1,200 pages, and I will just get it from the publisher. That's the sort of thing where I wouldn't go out and find that book because I didn't love it. So I wouldn't go out and find it. My rereading will be when the publishing world cycles back to do it again. I did like it. I liked it. I kind of liked both of these when I read them, but not for the work you put in. And question number three, what is your opinion of the Asean poems and the controversy that surrounded them? Well, this is, those of you who maybe don't know, this is an author named James McPherson who wrote a series of very good poems and tried to pass them off as the work of an ancient bard named Asean. And the world fell for it. And there were critics who didn't. There were critics who knew right away, come on, people, this is an obvious fraud. But most people fell for it, including a lot of literary people. And it was a fad. Asean kicked off a lot of literary fads. The Asean poems, everybody loved them, people memorized them. And then it came to light that it was a hoax. And I think it's terrible that the literary world has held that against the Asean poems themselves ever since. Because the Asean poems weren't revered just because of their folkloric background. They were revered because they're really good. And yet, nobody comes out with a Penguin, Bantam, Signet, Oxford, Norton. Nobody comes out with an annotated version of these things. A popular version for people to read that has the story behind it. And that's a terrible shame. It's like the literary world, the literati, were so outraged at being caught believing this hoax that they're never going to forgive. And that's terrible. There ought to be many popular editions of Asean, and there aren't any, as far as I know. Let's see here. Idic Warrior, another well-known troublemaker, says, do you ever see a day where you would ever abandon your fans and stop doing YouTube? Oh my, I doubt it. I love this. Absolutely love it. I don't see that happening. Hopefully you stay with us for as long as health allows. You are a dear friend and would hate not to be here, not to hear your dulcet tones anymore. Well, You know, one thing that might get in the way of that process is if there keep being more of you. You know? If I have 50,000 subscribers, God forbid, if I ever get to 50,000 subscribers, it's going to be hard for us to be a neat little tight-knit group of friends and frenemies. But I don't foresee that happening. So, no, I don't plan on stopping. This is too much fun. And then Scorch. Oh, goodness gracious. Look at this name. Oh, right. I remember your name. Deirdre O'Connor. We'll call you Deirdre O'Connor. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. Okay, Deirdre O'Connor asked what I'm just eyeballing this is 1,500 words of questions. So, okay. It looks like this is the end, and that's good because this is an hour of discussion right here. This is, good Lord. Okay, question number 1 is 600 words. About education. Should kids get out of high school with a good knowledge of Latin and ancient Greek? I'm reading Boswell's Life of Johnson for the read-along, and one of the things that pulled my attention is the type of education Johnson received as a child. As a teen, he had to translate Virgil and write poems in Latin, imitating the guy for school assignments. It got me thinking, and now I am deeply envious towards that kind of education, except the beating by teachers, that doesn't exist anymore outside the Jesuits and more traditional Jewish schools. Okay, the question involved in all of that is, should children be taught Greek and Latin? And I think they should. Yeah, children aren't taught languages at all anymore in school, and it really shows. but in addition to the languages, ancient Latin especially, if they're taught Latin, well, then they're taught the root of so many other languages, and they're taught a language that, as you point out, all of their canonical authors also learned. That's a great gift to give a student. So at least I would suggest that. I'm not sure that ancient Greek is as useful, but Latin, yeah, I would suggest that. Question number 2. You mentioned you've lived in several places. Yes, I have. I've lived in several places. I've visited everywhere in the world except Australia and the Australian archipelago. But of the everywhere that I've visited, I've lived in probably 15 or 16 places. You mentioned, let's see, when you moved, how did you deal with the great amount of books and especially shelves you have? I didn't usually have that many. I haven't set up a system like this more than 2 or 3 times. I barely have 1,000 books, and every time I moved, it was an absurd pain in the you-know-what. I guess ebooks completely rendered that problem obsolete. Well, they do, but I have a lot more than 1,000 books here, and it would be horrible. I just you fill the room with boxes, you mark all the boxes, and then you hope for the best. Question number 3. How important is nationality as a variable for readers' sensibilities? Sensibility in the meaning of finding an author effective, worthwhile, and simply good. In my experience, for example, the American reader is quite different from the French one. I ask this because you said yourself you are basically blind when it comes to a lot of high-status French writers like Proust, Balzac, and others. I can read them. I can critically assess them. I just don't love them the way their friends do. I'm not blind to them. I know the French are an extreme case. After all, we are talking about people who look at snails and think, I need to put that in my mouth. But I think my question stands. Different nationalities make different readers? I've never encountered that. I've never encountered anything that would tell me that was true. Question number 4. This question is directly related to the last one. Despite the universality of literature, is it possible that for an author to be great and effective in a country but to lose a lot of its steam in another country? Well, it's possible, yes, of course, if the author isn't translated. But if the author is translated in context, I think they can catch on pretty much anywhere. Question number 5. The same different wavelength about the French I also find related to several canonical Brazilian authors. Do you also have the blindness problem towards Brazilian writers? Well, you said I had a blindness problem. I don't have a blindness problem. I like quite a few Brazilian authors. I've mentioned a couple in this very Q&A. Just because I don't love an author doesn't mean I'm blind to them. Question number 4. Okay, well, from now on, right, this is the last question of this Q&A. From now on, 2 or 3 questions each, okay? And you don't need to explain your question to me. You don't need to write an essay for your question. I will get your question. I will understand it if it's just a question. Question number 4. Thoughts on Jose Saramago? I like him quite a bit. I've seen, it seems, lots of Americans complaining about the way he wrote. Did you have any problem with it? Are you saying that you've seen many Americans complain about the way Jose Saramago writes? Is that many more than 2? Is it more than 4? It's not more than 10. how many are we talking about here? Could just be they've got indigestion. Personally, it was never something that was in the way of my reading. In fact, I quite enjoy it. In my experience, Saramago today, even after his death 10 years ago, is basically venerated in Portugal and Brazil, but he is not talked about much in America. I remember Bloom writing, I think, in the Western canon, that Saramago is one of the most interesting novelists he knew of during the 80s and 90s. I think Harold Bloom did write that. But the thing we want to remember here is that I'm reading these questions on camera. So one person asking 1,700 words of questions is I'm reading every question on camera. So, but we're not done yet. We'll go to the next one, and then we'll be done. Is there a chance? There is a chance I'm moving to Boston in a few years, but I am a metric man, and I see you use a lot of measure units that I simply don't understand. Yeah, we don't use the metric system. You shouldn't move to Boston. It's brutally expensive. Brutally. One of the most expensive places in the country to live. Would it be too hard for someone like me to live in Boston? I am always confused when instead of kilometers per hour, you people measure speed in Fahrenheit per pound squared. Or maybe I should try to convert you all to metric religion. We tried that under Jimmy Carter and it didn't work. This will never be a metric country until it's grown out just demographically. If young people just grow it out, then it'll be gone demographically, but otherwise no. Would it be too hard for someone like me to live in Boston? Well, if you're looking for the metric system, then you're out of luck, because America doesn't use the metric system and never will use the metric system. But even in Boston, the difference between measuring things in pounds per square and Fahrenheit squared or the metric system is irrelevant, because in Boston things are measured in expletives. So you'll be, if you stock up on those, you'll be just fine. You don't have to worry about anything else. And especially driving in Boston, oh my, you're not really going to need to worry about kilometers or miles or anything like that. You're going to have to worry about heart attacks. Just how many heart attacks does it take to get you to the Starrow Thruway? And that, ladies and gentlemen, is that. That is our 7.4K Q&A. Amazing. I don't know how many videos this was. I think it was 5. I'm incredibly grateful for this. These are always so much fun, and it's not that long until we do 7.5. So I will make a call for questions when that happens. But in the meantime, I'm going to wrap this up. I think this is about 3 hours of videos, so there won't be any Daily Penguin today. There won't be any other kind of book stuff today. There will just be these questions. We will revert to normal programming tomorrow. So I'm going to wrap this up, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.